I'm a reporter who loves history. Reporting is the greatest job in the world. It's so great that sometimes I feel sorry for people who aren't reporters. And I admire historians, all you people here today. Historians teach the importance of memory and circumstance. They understand that we can learn from the past and the value of putting today's events in a historic context. Historians speak to the past in a modern syntax of the present, and then all of a sudden the stories come alive. It's not an easy concept for people who are not historians or journalists, because keeping track of history is a hell of a lot of work. And so much anecdotal history in our state is lost simply because, well, everybody here can come up with a separate reason. As a grade schooler, or when I was growing up, I followed all sports in South Dakota, but my two favorites were amateur baseball and high school basketball. As a grade schooler, I remember those March afternoons watching the State B on a portable black and white TV, rabbit-eared TV, set in Mrs. Ryder's classroom, and then going out at recess time to recreate the game with my friends on a snow-packed basketball court. It was the 1960s, and I remember coffee drinkers in the cafe in Lake Norden talking about the worries that go with spring flooding and the Vietnam War that was raging on the other side of the world. But as a 10-year-old, my overriding concern was whether or not the Lake Norden Blue Jays were going to beat the Bryant Scotties in the district basketball tournament, or whether my baseball hero, Tony Oliva, was going to lead the Twins to a World Series with an American League batting championship. The first State B tournament I remember was in 1968, the year the Arlington Cardinals won the championship. Arlington was 26 miles south of Lake Norden. So a couple of weeks after the tournament, my dad and I drove to Arlington to sit in the cafe and hope that maybe one of the basketball heroes that we had seen on TV would walk into the cafe. I wanted to see Rich Andrzejewski. I wanted to see Paul Harmel in person. I was in awe of the Arlington Cardinals. And the awe and the players and the scene of South Dakota sports has never left me. A few Christmases back, while visiting with my cousin Marvin, a hog farmer from Arlington, he told me he was working with Randy Jenks on some rural development issues. I about fell out of my chair. That Randy Jenks? The guy that was a statewide basketball hero for the DeSmit Bulldogs in the 1970s? Wow. I couldn't believe it. I'd read about Laura Ingalls Wilder, but I wanted to meet Randy Jenks. I remember him in that maroon DeSmit Bulldog uniform shooting free throw after free throw after free throw on statewide television. He was such a mythical figure in my mind. I have never met him. But the image of him working on rural water issues, my mind just couldn't grasp. I played varsity basketball as a sophomore in Lake Norden. But then we consolidated with 3 other schools, Bryant, Hayti, and Hazel. And in 1974, I was cut from the Hamlin Charger basketball team that won the 1974 State B title. And even though I wasn't on the team, and the team was in Sioux Falls, I tried to make a contribution. My classmate, Pat Ward, and I taped all the varsity games that year, including a Christmas tournament game versus the Parker Pheasants in Brookings. Wouldn't you know, Hamlin played Parker for the B title in Sioux Falls later that spring. So before the tournament, the Charger coaches were eager to watch the tapes of the earlier Parker-Hamlin game to pick up some scouting tips. So Pat and I set up the big machinery. It wasn't like it was today. We set up the big machinery and we got it all set up. There was only one problem. We had the game taped, but we'd forgotten to turn on the video. So when the players tried to watch the game, there was all kinds of audio with Pat and I talking and making jokes of all the players, but there was no video. And of course, no help to the coaches trying to beat the Parker Pheasants. Anyway, Hamlin won the 1974 State B tournament 36-33, and nobody was happier than I was to know that my goof-up didn't cost the Chargers the state title. And it didn't cost Steve Brown, our star guard that year, a chance to get into the South Dakota Hall of Fame. I thought about it this weekend because he is being inducted into the South Dakota Hall of Fame this weekend in South Dakota. And if we had screwed up that video to the point where we lost the game, I wonder if that would have been happening. And for me, you know what? I hated to see the basketball seasons end. I knew it meant that baseball was right next on the schedule, and I couldn't always wait for baseball. Baseball has an overwhelming appeal to me for many reasons that I don't know why. And I've spent my entire life, including 26 years as a baseball reporter, trying to find out why. I'm amazed at the power of baseball. I get choked up sometimes. Growing up in baseball crazy Lake Norden, I see how baseball built community. I saw how it connected families and linked the past to the present. And I'll bet you anything here today that more people can share memories about baseball than any other sport. One time when I was interviewing the future Hall of Fame catcher Ivan Rodriguez about flying to Puerto Rico to go home, he said, I always go home on a Sunday night. And he said, I always get the last flight out. And I said, why would that be? Why would you fly to San Juan on the last flight out? He said, because I like flying into San Juan at night. He said, when I look out the windows, I can see all the baseball lights, and I know that everything is well. Well, if you fly down I-29, or if you fly anywhere over South Dakota during June and July on a Sunday night, you'll probably see the same thing. Canova, Del Rapids, Scotland, you name it. Whoops, what happened? Is this working? I know you had trouble with it.
Yep, that's it.
Yeah. So, I love how baseball brings me home. To me, a baseball park is a home. Whether it stands next to a cornfield, as it does in Lake Norden, or it's jammed into the city streets, as it is in Pittsburgh, Washington, and Baltimore. I know this is a little sappy, but this is who I am. Baseball has rural roots, and it's made for small-town delight. And why all of us here grew up in classic small-town South Dakota, I sometimes believe that small town is a state of mind, a certain perspective that we all want. We grew up in the original small town, in the small town that everybody wants to be in. But I remember once talking with Cal Ripken, the shortstop who played his entire career with the hometown Baltimore Orioles. I kept asking him, why don't you want to leave for New York or Los Angeles? Would you think about moving to the Twins or the Texas Rangers? And he said he never wanted to play any other place than his hometown, Baltimore. And he was trying to explain why. And I kept asking him. And he kept trying to answer. And finally he got frustrated and he said, Mel, you just have to understand small-town baseball. Well, Cal, I do. My dad's name was Ray. He was the president of the State Amateur Baseball Association, and he promoted baseball with relentless waves of energy. He was a feed salesman. He had cattle. He sold vitamins. He sold sand and gravel. He sold jelly and jam. He grew up playing baseball on a farm, and the love started there. I'm proud to say that he was one of the founders of the South Dakota Amateur Baseball Hall of Fame in my hometown. It was built because of his love of town team baseball and the inspiration he got from the hard-working people that made baseball run so well in South Dakota. Now, how did the Hall of Fame get started? This is a very interesting story. My dad always wanted to build a baseball Hall of Fame in his hometown, But it cost $50,000, $60,000, $70,000. One day he was advertising in the local Herald Enterprise for donations to new lights at the ballpark. He said you can leave your $10 and $20 donations in the cigar box in the cafe. About a week after that ran, he got a check for $2,000 from a woman named Helen Salo Mitchell, who lived in Lantana, Florida. My dad didn't have any idea who she was. So he called her, and she said, "My name is Helen Salo. My dad was a mayor in Lake Norden in the 20s and the 30s, and she said, I wanted to do something for his hometown. And I still get the hometown paper after all these years. So I sent you this check with the idea that I hope that it helps your baseball lights." And my dad said, "Well, how would you like to build a Hall of Fame?" "And if you build the Hall of Fame in Lake Norden, we will name it Salo Hall after your father." About 3 days later, he got a check for $40,000. I believe that it was the quickest, easiest fundraising story in the history of the city.